Welcome to the first ever live YouTube edition of Deep Look, Ultiworld's weekly radio show about the current state of Ultimate. I am the host and the editor of Ultiworld, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me is Ultiworld senior editor Keith Raynor. Keith, how are you?
I'm doing well, and we're moving further and further away from this intro being accurate, as we've gone from radio show to podcast, and now we're a video show. We've got to tie it together.
Yeah, it's true. I don't really know how this is going to go. I mean, we've obviously done plenty of live shows in the past, but they've always been audio only. So to do this live with video is a new thing. And so hopefully it means that some folks will be able to join us in the YouTube chat. I actually see there's already a lively chat going on. So we'll be able to take some questions there a little bit later on. But Keith, I mean, first of all, how are things going for you up in Connecticut?
Holding strong, just trying to be safe, being appropriately cautious. We have immunodeficient folks in the home, so for us it's a lot about really being as cautious as possible to help make sure that everybody's safe. My wife and I have also been doing some household. We're looking, so doing that process while not being able to be within 6 feet of people and not wanting to be around their stuff is challenging too. But these are just the modern times, That's what we're going through.
I know. I reached out to a real estate agent a couple weeks ago just for some general fact finding about getting an apartment in New York City, and he was telling me that basically the entire market has just ground to a halt and that there's nothing happening right now. So we're kind of just sit and wait here and not really trying to do much. But I understand it's hard if you want to go see houses because you feel like you have to go into other people's spaces, which feels very unusual right now.
We in fact canceled a couple of visits because it was just there are still people there. We were we only want to see houses that nobody's living in, that we can be sure it's going to be safe. We now have gotten to the point where we're potentially doing an inspection on a home, and the inspector is you can't have anybody with you because we can't have too many people there. So it's a process.
Right. Yeah. Let's get into some Ultimate talk. Obviously the coronavirus situation continues. I'm going to try not to dwell on the sort of the negativity of that too much. This weekend was set to be the start of the AUDL and PUL seasons. So we were supposed to be having opening poll for 2 of the semi-pro leagues. The college season, regular season would have ended last weekend. We would be getting ready for conferences very soon. So there's kind of a lot of hypotheticals, but things are happening. We are starting to at least get a little bit of a sense of what the calendar could look like going forward, and perhaps some small nuggets of good news about at least, I think, what we might see from WIFDF and the World Championships, which have been, postponed, as we talked about last time. But perhaps there is a hope that tournament's going to get rescheduled. So I guess, Keith, to kind of start us off here, do you want to talk a little bit about what we've been working on the website this week, which is player awards? So we've been doing our college awards. Obviously, it's a lot harder to do them when you're talking about having only a 2/3 of the regular season, no postseason, and some really good teams never even played. The number 1 team in D3 men's, Middlebury, never played. So that is very strange. I do feel like we saw enough from the D1 teams to feel like we could have some sense of, okay, this is what these were some of the best players of the year, and we feel good about what we've been able to put out so far.
It's a great way for us to start with some positivity, right? Look at these players who are having exceptional seasons, and certainly through, as much of the season as we got through, 2/3, I'd say, most teams that are going to play 3 tournaments got in 2. Many of the West Coast teams got in 3 tournaments. Does it mean that we have less data than we'd like? Of course. But I feel like that means that we probably aren't getting it 100% right, with right being what it would look like at the end of the year. But we're getting a fair view of it. And we had already talked, to pull back the curtain a little bit for the audience, we had already talked about doing regular season specific awards at the end of the regular season this year. So this is kind of taking the place of that, but then also functioning as what would have been our end of season awards. It led to some interesting discussions, and definitely the way that the awards worked out, there's some really exciting races in the office for who is going to take these. And I think the results have been, in some cases, really surprising where we were back in January and February.
Oh, for sure. And, I think it's just hard to make these kinds of votes. I mean, for one thing, our reporters who have major feedback into these awards have largely been seeing the teams in their regions of the country. So our West Coast reporters have seen a lot of the West Coast teams, vice versa for the East Coast reporters. And so I think it's hard to, even if you're watching tape, to really get a full sense of what the entire scope looks like. That's usually what happens at Nationals, when we get a chance to see the top players really going head to head, and all of our reporters are in one place getting a lot of looks at the best teams. So I think that you have to kind of weigh, there's like these two, it's fairly bi-coastal. I mean, I know there's like Midwest tournaments as well, but for the most part, you have the West, you have the East, and you have to try to figure out, okay, well, these were some of the best players in the East, these are some of the best players in the West. How do we merge that into a meaningful set of awards? So, go ahead, Keith.
You're speaking to I think one of the challenges, and one of the things that you see reflected. Like, I think we have to be forward with the fact that we can only work with the information we had. So I think that you see the teams that played at the California tournaments overrepresented in the awards compared to where they might have been from the end of the year. I think that probably is mostly reflected in the women's division, where you see, a lot of UC Santa Barbara and a lot of those teams, Stanford, near the top of these lists. And that's in part, we only got a limited view. Dartmouth played one tournament at the beginning of the year, right? There could be a player of the year. There could be multiple All-Americans on that team, but we just didn't get as good a look at them as we did at these teams that literally played 3 tournaments, mostly fairly competitive ones. So not getting the Northwest Challenge, not getting the Centex, obviously that stuff matters. But this is what we had from this year. And there are a lot of really exciting players who I think had a real chance to hold the position in these award races.
Yeah. So, not to bury the lead here, men's player of the year this year, Jordan Kerr from BYU, the lefty handler, and the D1 women's player of the year, Margot Erheim from Tufts. I really have no nitpick with either of these. These are the top of my ballot. And I think that they both stood out, above the pack when you looked at what we saw from this regular season.
Absolutely. I had Kerr at the top of my ballot. He has been a fantastic player for multiple years now, a complete force on offense, really the driving force of that BYU offense. Just such a multifaceted player, big tool set as a thrower, dynamic without the disc in his hands. He's a big, long guy. He's a tough matchup. I think earned. And I actually didn't have Erheim at the top of my ballot. I had Caitlin Weaver from UC Santa Barbara as my player of the year. But I the more we've discussed, the more I think that I would be more and more inclined to look at Erheim. I had her second on my ballot. For me, it was very 1A and 1B, and I could easily have flipped them. Erheim is one of the few returning All-Americans this year in the women's division, and is a really effective two-way player, has grown so much as a thrower on top of the size and athleticism that she brings as a cutter. You really see what she brings to the field as a leader. A lot of times leadership, it can be hard to see from the outside, very easy to see with a player like Margot Erheim.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I just saw that we got an email about this. Margot had, I think, 7 goals and 2 assists against Carlton in the Queen City tune-up final. I mean, that says it all. Like, to go up against the best team in the country, yeah, sure, you didn't win the game, but nobody beat Carlton this season. to get those kinds of stats, that's crazy. And really, we've talked about it before that this was not a particularly top-heavy year for really elite-level upperclassmen. And Erheim was like coming into the year kind of at the top of the list, and I think absolutely proved it on the field this year. We've given out a number of other awards. What's come out today so far? I actually haven't checked in.
Today we wrapped up the individual awards with Coach of the Year. So that was our final award. So everything has been given out with All Americans to come next week.
So Keith, how about the rookies? You want to give us the winners there?
I mean, this might be the most interesting category in a lot of ways. In the women's division, Hazel Ostrowski, also from Tufts, the nod at the top of the list, and she is followed up by Abby Hecko and Alyssa from Washington and Carlton, respectively. In the men's division, Riley Curtis, maybe the biggest upset, I would say, from where we thought in the year, out of UCLA, takes the top honors for Rookie of the Year, and he is followed up by Jack Brown from Washington, and Matthew McKnight from UNC, who maybe I'll just start with Matthew McKnight. We may have been overlooking him coming into the year. I mean, I think he probably deserved a bit of hype given his status as a youth player, and maybe got overlooked.
Well, I mean, I don't think that's so much a knock on Matthew McKnight as it is a sign of what a good rookie class it was this year. I mean, think about how many players that we talked about coming into this season that are not on this list. Basically all of them. Like, you can run down the list. Like, all of the kids at Colorado, including Danny Landisman, who for me got totally robbed not to end up on this podium at minimum. He was great this season. And you've got Jacques Nissen at Brown, and you've got Leo Gordon at Brown. I mean, we talked about a lot of really promising players who really they played well. A lot of it comes down to role, I feel like, when it comes to the rookies. And, the reporters out east got a great look at these players. And I think, by and large, picked McKnight as kind of the most impressive in that pack. So I respect that completely. I mean, I think everybody who is in college is probably thinking, so-and-so player on my team got snubbed for rookie. Well, that's just because it's such a deep class. I don't really know what to tell you. Like, I don't think this is one where we can really feel great about picking it at this point in the year, because I want to see what these players do at nationals when the pressure is on and when the role is required to be the biggest. I don't know that you necessarily see the same list if we get to nationals. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at some of these players that could have made a big impact here. Tony Veneris was a big name coming into the year. Aiden Downey at Georgia, Aylin Learned at Colorado, part of that stacked Colorado class. Calvin Staunton, someone who came up during this. Those are guys who were they were people being talked about to be in the running for this award. But I think Kirkman Davis is really interesting. He's someone we got a chance to see in person at last year's high school national invite. He was Leo Gordon's teammate on that Berkeley team that ended up winning the thing. And he was the primary offensive player. I mean, Gordon was probably the biggest playmaker for the team, but he was the central piece for them and is part of a number of Berkeley players that UCLA team. He might be the best player on that UCLA team who is, if the season ended today, in bid earning position. Like, I mean, that could be a nationals team. So before you say, not to discount the quality of players that you're talking about who could have made a bigger run in a bigger role at bigger stage at nationals. I mean, if Kirkman Davis helps lead his team to nationals, you can see how he ends up at the top of this podium.
100%. Oh, don't get me wrong. I'm pretty sure I had Kirkman Davis at the top of my list. It was either him or Landisman. And the thing is, for me, it comes down to Kirkman Davis being in just a much bigger role on the team and shouldering a load that you normally see from seniors and fifth years. I mean, the centerpiece of the offense and doing a great job while taking on that role. It's rare, even today, to see a player take on that much and excel that much on a team at that level. So it's one thing if you're on a really bad team that's not relevant and come in and you're the only player who played high school ultimate. But to do it coming into a team that's good is a whole different ball game. And I mean, he was tremendous. I mean, it's not surprising, but I don't think I had him pegged to be this effective coming into the season.
No, and we're getting a lot in the chat, and there's stuff on Twitter about Danny Landsman. Danny Landsman was one of the most touted recruits coming into the year, and I maybe started off maybe a little slow, and I think he's an example of whose role maybe wasn't enough. I mean, he's competing with players on his own team for this Rookie of the Year honor, but also he was a cog in a strong O-line, which I think puts him in the position with someone like Matthew McKnight, and that's their voting tallies were really similar. He very easily could have ended up in the third spot, while you had someone like Kirkman Davis, who was the central figure in his offense, and Jack Brown, who may have been the best defender on his team. People were talking about him getting deep voting votes. So these are players who had really sizable roles. So it's again, anybody who might misunderstand, the awards are not a judge of talent; they're a judge of production. And when you have a better chance at more production, and the story is very similar in the women's division to me. I think you had these really big name recruits, and Abby Hecko and Alyssa Earhart end up second and third on the list, and Hazel Ostrowski emerges as the number one, and she was also a well-known recruit, but probably not with quite as much fanfare as players like Earhart and Kennedy McCarthy or Steve Gaskell. There were a number of players who were outperformed in our eyes during the partial season, and Ostrowski, I think, ran away with this award with her performance for Tufts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's not a big surprise, knowing the quality that she was bringing from high school, but again, I don't know that she was the favorite to win coming into the year. I certainly wouldn't say that. But I think given role production, like what we're talking about, it was an easy choice in this case. I don't really know that it felt like a particularly close race, even though there were some players in the field who, I think maybe have a higher ceiling long term, players like Hecko and Gaskell. But I think from what we saw on the field this year, that's what you go with. And Ostrowski had brought all of that, talent to the table right away in year one.
Yeah, Kennedy McCarthy and Stacy Gaskell, I think, were two of the biggest contenders coming into the year. I think they each only got in one tournament. They each had to miss one of their team's two tournaments. That really hurt their ability to be represented here. Hecko had kind of a diminished role in her first tournament with Washington and really came more alive in their second tournament. Sky Fernandez from Colorado was someone who really impressed this year.
Great.
Earhart, who just had a nice role with a strong Carlton team, looked like she fit in. She was the one player, I think, who maybe didn't have an outsized role for her team, but still made it on the podium because of her ability to compete top.
Keith, make sure you're not running the stream in the background at all. Your internet connection is suspect at best right now. So if there's anything you can do to get the internet fairies moving a little faster, that'd be great.
Do you know how to get me the chat? Can you give me the chat somewhere?
Well, just pause the video and the chat will still run.
Okay, that's what I had going, but I got rid of it.
All right, so let's quickly take a look at some of these other awards. Breakout Player of the Year, both men's and women's, out yesterday. Ethan Ilizarde from UNC Wilmington wins it in the men's division, with Connor Tabor from Colorado and Munis Tahir from California as the two runner-ups. And in the women's division, Elsa Winslow from UC Santa Barbara wins the award, with Claire Toth from California and Stephanie Yen from UCLA getting the runner-up spots. A West Coast sweep for Breakout Player in the women's division.
I think a great example of a California advantage of getting in three tournaments, really getting a chance to familiarize yourself with these players, getting to see them grow over the course of the year. But three really deserving honorees. I think Winslow might have been the favorite to win this award coming into the year. She was someone we highlighted early in the year, but she got a bigger role. She became a primary goal scorer for the best, most explosive offenses we saw this season, and the result was her getting the Breakout Player of the Year. Claire Toth was someone who kind of came off of my radar. She was awesome for California, particularly in their second tournament of the year when they were at Pres Day, and they suffered without her. when she wasn't able to play with them later in the year. So I think it was a good example of a player who's really grown and someone we should really be paying attention to next year. But it definitely interesting. And on the men's side, I mean, Ethan Elizarda, I mean, I don't think I knew who he was coming into the season. I mean,
Nope.
he is a prototypical breakout player.
Straight
even
up
though
didn't know
his
the
team
name.
may have not quite had the same success as like Colorado.
Yeah, I mean, he was great. I first learned about him in the fall. He was one of their key offensive players, and really they're one of our best players at CCC when I watched Wilmington have that great run at CCC, and continued to do that in the spring. So really impressive. You know, Wilmington looked like they were a team that was headed back to nationals this year, and he's probably the number one reason why. I mean, just gave them some serious firepower on the offense, and just stepping up into a big role. And, you know, another product of the high school pipeline that is North Carolina. And, you know, I've already seen people kind of complaining about breakout player the same way we've seen rookie, because there's so many players that you could point to. You know, I think, Keith, is this right? The 4, 5, and 6 spots in our lineup were all Michigan players.
And so I think it was Theo Shapinski who was one of those players who asked for the rankings on the comment of the article, which is awesome. You got to be able to rub it in your friend's face if you win. But his coach, really him, in our YouTube section, shout out to James Highsmith, who was just announced as a runner-up for Coach of the Year for Michigan, said that Sean Johnson would be the B Pody and the Pody list if Easterns happened. Sean Johnson was the winner among the Michigan players. Parker Howard, also in here, the other coach for Michigan. I don't know if that's really them, but they have correctly identified Sean Johnson. So maybe the other Michigan players who feel like they should be on the list need to go talk to their coaches about what they can do to outperform Sean. But he was the love house for Michigan, and maybe they split the vote a little bit too much. Very close, though. I was really impressed with Munis to hear from what I saw from him.
Yes.
He looked like the real deal for Cal. I was like, who is this guy? Because he is a lot of fun to watch.
Well, I remember when because I got out to a couple of the West Coast tournaments. I was at Santa Barbara and Stanford, and he was playing great both times. And I remember thinking when I was watching them play, I thought, if he is is eligible for breakout player, then he could absolutely win the award. Now, I know he didn't end up winning, but he was probably their most impressive player. And remember that breakout player, you got to be a sophomore or a junior. So
yeah, all the Tommy Dill Williams supporters on Twitter and in the chat. He is too old to win the award. So that's how it goes.
Tommy Williams underrated. I mean, I've been seeing a lot of that the last couple days on Twitter. The UNC defender, and just really versatile player all the way around. That's fair. I mean, I think it's fair to call him underrated since he wasn't really getting talked about coming into the year. And then, the thing is, like, based on his role, it's not like he is one of the absolute go-to guys that you really think of when you think of UNC. He's a glue guy. He's a really good glue guy.
And a great one.
Exactly. And the thing is, that's an important role, but it doesn't mean that you're the best player on the team or that, you should be an All-American or anything like that. It can just mean that you're very good. Now, underrated, I'll give it to you because it's true. He wasn't really getting talked about, but I think he impressed Edward Stevens, our reporter at Smoky Mountain Invite, and may have even made the top 7 line at that tournament. So shout out to Tommy Williams. No disrespect, that's for sure.
Disrespect.
All right, so then we have Coach of the Year. Just came out, like, literally in the last couple of minutes. I don't even know if people have seen these yet. By the way, we're live right now. We're watching the chat. We're going to get into people's questions a little bit later. D1 Men's Coach of the Year, Cody Mills, our very own Cody Mills, Cal Poly Slow, the Homerism Award at Ultiworld. We give it to our own, but really, Cody absolutely earned it. Bryce Merrill from BYU, first runner-up, and Parker Howard and James Highsmith from Michigan, your second runner-up. In the women's race, the large Stanford coaching staff, 4 names, Robin Davis, Jamie Newer, Jenny Loomis, and Amel Awadil Karim. They win it I feel like they could win it any single year, to be honest. The first runner-up, Sanghua Hong, Meriden Estes, and Becky Malinowski from Tufts, and Lizzie Jones, the second runner-up from Georgia Tech. Thoughts, Keith, on these award recipients?
Who wants to start? I feel like of any of them, Stanford and the women's side is the clear favorite. I mean, that was a team that even I believe when we talked on the podcast about teams we think could underperform, teams we were worried about. I was worried about Stanford, and that was when they were back at number 19 in the power rankings. Now they're a top 5 team, a title contender.
Incredible.
With what? What did they change that made them so good? It wasn't like they imported some great players or something like that. They just worked with the resources that they had. That coaching staff, maybe because there's 4 of them and they're all awesome. I mean, they have just a wealth of coaches, and they utilize that effectively. They take the personnel and the pieces that they have. They figure out what can we do to maximize these personnel. I mean, it's incredible the coaching job that we've seen over the years from that Stanford staff. And yeah, I mean, Graham said it when he talked about them in the write-up. When we talk about them, it feels like that that legendary coach status. I think I talked about Gino Auriemma, but someone who you feel like could win the award any year, really, because they just consistently do such an excellent job. So no surprise there. And then you see the tough staff getting a reward. Also no surprise. That team really brought it this year and looked well coached doing it. And I think one of the markers that we look for is teams where players we didn't know about seem to really be performing very well. And we've learned about some new players on Tufts that we didn't know about prior to this.
Yeah, I don't really have a whole lot to add to that. I mean, Stanford they take a team that basically gets no recruits in a massive recruiting year and essentially has one elite thrower in Hallie Dunham and turns it into a championship contender team. And it's not like they've had elite pipeline talent coming into the program either over the last few years. I mean, when we came into the season, we thought this team might not even go to nationals again. So for them to end up playing as well as they did, I mean, it speaks volumes about what has been the best coaching staff in college ultimate, period, for the last, let's call it, decade, period. So well earned. Have they won it before? I feel like they must have won it before.
Yeah, a different formation. They had 3 coaches, I think, at the time. I think Jenny Wang was back on, and that was in 2015. And this is their 4th time on the podium since we started doing this in 2014.
There you go. And just quickly on Cody Mills and Cal Poly Slow. Cody's got a well-earned reputation for being a very intelligent coach. And I think, the trajectory of that program speaks to that. They get to semis last year. But to me, the impressive thing is that this year, despite losing a ton of really talented players that helped take them to semis last year, they still remained not just relevant, but very impressive. I mean, they started the year around 17th, I think, in our preseason power rankings, and they moved all the way up into the top 10 easily. And they were competitive with the very best teams, including BYU, and pretty much everybody they played. So, they lose the tight game to Colorado in the semis of Stanford Invite, but let's be honest, they were the better team in that game. They kind of blew it. And I think they had a really good chance to win that tournament. Kind is fair. And they beat Washington to close out the tournament. I mean, look, this is just a really good team. And that's despite the fact that their best players are basically sophomores. And I think that's really, that speaks to coaching. I mean, they obviously have gotten some really strong players into the program over the last couple of years, but you don't put the team on the back of, rookies and sophomores and win unless the coaching is really strong. So, it's easy to see when you watch them play. Their defense is one of the best coached in the country.
Definitely. Cody's, I think, earned a lot of respect from not just the staff, but from coaches around the country who compete against him and the teams that he coaches. So it's a great year, I think, for coaching. Sometimes we feel like it's like who are we going to pick this year? Like who's really stood out? And I think that this is a year where we felt like we had some really strong candidates.
All right, well, we got more awards to come. All-American Awards will be coming out next week, and so that will be exciting. We'll pick the top 14 players, and the subscribers will get access to our unofficial third teams, so definitely stay tuned for that. Let's see. Anything else on this, Keith, before we move on to something else?
Did you have any O-Pody or D-Pody thoughts? Maybe a snub?
I forgot we didn't even get to O and D-Pody.
Yeah, we didn't even in the men's division. Offensive Player of the Year, Anders Youngst from North Carolina. Defensive Player of the Year, Taylor Barton from BYU. And the women's division, Offensive Player of the Year, Hallie Dunham from Stanford. And Nariah Sims is the Defensive Player of the Year out of Carlton.
Nariah Sims was a lock. Hallie Dunham was close to a lock. Taylor Barton, I think the thing about Taylor Barton is I feel like maybe he's getting the D-Pody offensive skill bump because he's, don't get me wrong, great defender, but one of the big things he brings to the team is that he's also very good after the turnover. And it's hard to not let that cloud your judgment of a player. But I don't know that you necessarily, like all of the D-Pody candidates this year, I feel like were in that realm of being offensively talented as well. So I don't really have a problem with that. And then who am I missing?
Anders Youngst.
Anders Youngst.
Yeah, just Anders Youngst.
No, I mean he's been tremendous. Simple. Tremendous.
I think that he was not someone who probably would have pegged coming into the year. Some more high-profile teammates rating O-Podies on his line with him in Rose, who I think seemed like he was a little easy in the beginning of the year, but Youngst has just been on a tear. It continues to develop in that UNC system, that environment that's really helped him grow. I think he looks a lot like he's followed in the footsteps of the really great offensive players before him, and it makes him just a nightmare in the red zone.
Emmett Holden in the chat saying that KJ Koo got robbed for D-Pody. How do you feel?
I don't know about robbed. I think Taylor Barton's a pretty tough customer on the defensive end. So maybe we just felt like we couldn't give two Cal Poly slow players the D-Pody 2 years in a row, but I guess we just did it for UNC, the Pody side. So, by
the way, I want to just speak a little grievance right now. I've seen a couple of little snide tweets about BYU players being picked for these awards. Just get out of here with that nonsense. Look, this has been one of the best teams in the country for multiple seasons. And this is, they're arguably the best team this year. There's other teams on the list that you could choose, but I think they are clearly arguably up there after their warm-up performance. And I think Jordan Kerr was an easy pick for Player of the Year this year. And so, to be snide about BYU, why take shots at this team? Why do people want to take so many shots at this team? Like, this is the one year where realistically their players have a chance to win actual awards. Jordan Kerr was a second-team All-American last year, but let's be honest, he probably wouldn't have won Pody this year had there been a full season, including nationals, because the team can't play at regionals and nationals. And that's very unfortunate, but it also means that, you're missing out on one of the most important things when we're talking about criteria for Player of the Year. During this regular season, it was undeniable that he was the best player, and Taylor Barton is a great pick for D-Pody. So when I see these people complaining about BYU players getting it, I'm like, why are you taking a shot at this team that otherwise never gets any recognition at all? Trash.
Hey, I don't know where the hate comes from. This is a team that goes out there and grinds despite never getting the shot that all of us are playing for. Like their whole season is built around having a great regular season. They have to somehow recruit and get buy-in and get people to come back after leaving for 2 years. They have a tough go of it, and you can say that that's self-imposed, but they're just dudes who want to go out there and play Ultimate. They're not driving that bus. So I think we recognize, and I think the teams that they're beating, which are most of them, recognize that this BYU team is for real, and they're not puffed up. They're not we're not a front for making BYU pretending that they're good or something like that. But
Okay, I got a question for you, Keith. I got a question
Yeah.
for you. If BYU had gone on their North Carolina tour and they had played UNC, who wins? Because that might have been a de facto national championship game. Could have been.
Are those games sanctioned?
I believe they were going to be sanctioned.
I've watched a number of these showcase games for UNC, and they always seem really lax when I watch these. They did like these Atlantic Coast showcase games.
Yeah.
They seem like really relaxed, and like they'll play really close games with teams that are probably not as good as them. Because you would think otherwise that with a home field advantage, they're going to beat BYU. Like they have to be the favorite, right?
I mean, they're probably the favorite, but like by how much? And do they win? I mean, do you think they win? Include the motivation, include the decisions about it, who they play. Blah, blah, blah.
I think UNC wins. Like if I have these two teams matched up against each other and like I ran a simulation 1,000 times, I would say UNC is going to win 15-14 on average. Like it's very close, but I would take UNC. I think they were the best team during this regular season.
Yeah, it's fair. It's fair. I mean, they clearly. It's hard to assess. I think a little bit because BYU, like their one big test, came at a tournament where they had to play this insane schedule, 8 games to 15 in 2 days. That's just grueling. I mean, and so they only lose the one game. They lose to Brown in the final game, and player of the year for 2020, Jordan Kerr, is not playing in the game. And it was a double game point game. Now, UNC was more dominant in their wins for the most part, but I don't think certainly can't call it a lock for UNC. I think I take UNC to win, though. The UNC's defense was so good this year. And, so was their offense. They were great all around. But, I mean, their defense just killed teams that otherwise had great-looking offenses. You see UMass, one of the best offensive teams this year, get smoked by UNC because they just can't hang with the UNC D-line. I would have loved to see that UNC BYU game, though, because BYU's defense was also really good and was also very punishing when they got the disc. I think we could have seen a lot of breaks, and it'd be a great game. Hopefully, you know what? Maybe they reschedule college nationals and they don't put it on a Sunday, and we can have BYU at nationals. It's actually
that's a
possible.
lot of ifs. I guess it's maybe more possible than ever before.
It's never been more possible than it is this year.
Are you segueing us into that topic? Is that where you have to go next now?
Well, sure. Why don't we talk about the schedule? Why don't we talk a little bit about the schedule, and then we'll get to. Well, you know what? Let's actually take a second. We have a lot of college questions in the chat. So let's go ahead and take a look here. There's a lot of comments. Wow. Let's see. I'm going to make a couple people mods while I'm at it. Apologies to our podcast listeners who are listening to this after the fact and have to wait for us to look for these comments. A lot of love for Joe Merrill from BYU, which is very fair. I mean, there were some folks who thought Merrill was their best player. I don't know that I agree with that, but he was certainly in their top 3 or 4. What else we got here?
I think we've touched on a couple of these things that have popped up in here.
All right.
Let's see. I'm looking at what the responses are to the UNC BYU question. BYU rolled in the fall. Come on, it was CCC. A lot of things happened in the fall.
BYU did roll, though.
Yeah, I remember you seemed to think that UNC's rookies weren't going to be any good based on that fall. Like, it's a very different year.
They looked.
If you look at UNC at Smoky Mountain, they do not. That CCC team's nowhere to be found.
It's true. It's very true. All right. Well, I don't see any other specific questions right now. So,
someone just asked how would the bids shake out, in our opinion, if the season had played out. I assume is what they're implying. I don't know if they're just saying how would they assign bids if we do nationals in the fall, or whether it's if the rest of the season had happened, how would bids have landed?
It seems to me like if we had played out the season, what would have happened? I we've been discussing that internally for a project we're working on that I'm going to keep secret for now, but I think it's very hard to say. There was a lot in the air because there were a lot of meaningful tournaments that were going to happen on the last day of the regular season, and it's just, how do you know? You know, like, for example, Cal Poly Slow has to come from California to South Carolina and play, and if they play really well or they play really poorly, that could swing multiple bids. So I just find it hard to really assess the answer to that. The one thing I would say, I think the AC men would pick up one bid. They had like 3 teams just outside the bubble, and I think they would have picked up a bid.
I think that's probably right, although they really kind of did themselves in. UNC Wilmington and NC State both 17 games already. So that kind of puts them in a tough spot because it means that a lot of their rating has already kind of been decided. Gives them a lot less volatility to move around. I think that they were close enough. It's out according to Cody Mills' site. So, I think that they certainly could have played their way in at Easterns, but they're not giving them giving themselves a ton of wiggle room there, especially but with South ahead of them. Like UCLA, I think is one of the teams you would move the most, but they already played 23 games. So,
right.
I don't even know if they had any this year. They might have more or less solidified themselves.
Right.
To figure out exactly what would have happened, but I think you're probably right that an AC team feels like they would have gotten in, and maybe the victim would have been Tufts. They still had a tournament to play at Easterns, and they were a key connectivity team, so a lot of second order effects there for them. And on the women's side, also still tough to say because there were some teams that hadn't played a lot of games yet. Your Dartmouths, your Wisconsins, your UBCs. These teams that had played like 5-6 games apiece or whatever, so their ratings were super volatile and could have moved around a lot, and that makes it really tricky to figure out what would have happened. Do I think one of the North Central teams maybe gets in, or South Carolina, who's an AC team, had 5 games under their belt? They were literally one spot out, so one of those teams could get in. A team like Florida, a second team from the Southeast, could have fallen out. I don't know who else falls out though. So maybe see one in each side.
Here's some takes from the chat. UNC coach David Allison: BYU definitely beats UNC this year if they came to play our showcase game, no doubt. I'm not sure if he's being sincere or not.
DA trying to fire him up, trying to fire the boys up.
Tanner Johnson should have been Offensive Player of the Year. It's reasonable. I'll say from my perspective, he was not at the top of my ballot because when I saw him playing this year, he was far more just sort of in the system. And I think that was probably for the best for UMass, but he wasn't dictating the way that he has in years past. Not that that's necessarily the optimal thing for the team overall. He was still very good. He finished 3rd in our rankings as second runner-up for the OPODI award, but I think Anders was just like more important to the offense than to the UNC offense than Tanner was to the UMass offense.
Yeah, I agree, and I don't know that Tanner was quite at the dominant level that I think he played much better at Smoky Mountain than he did at their earlier season events. But crazy, Tanner, 3 straight years in the OPODI podium. He won it in 2018, second runner-up last year, and third runner-up this year.
It's no surprise.
When you think about his skill set, it's not. But
what's crazy is they didn't go to nationals last year,
and
he still was on the podium. That's how good he was during the regular season.
I think it's rough to blame a guy for the final play because there were a lot of plays before that, but not a great last play for Tanner.
I feel bad for him. Because this was the year that UMass was going to go back to nationals, and he had a chance to go and like get the dub. I mean, I don't think they were the favorite to win, but they would have had a chance. And, you know, to have it cut short, that sucks. Let's take this chance to talk about this. Well, I don't want to go into it. We did it as a subscriber bonus. People can hear what we think about the eligibility issue, and there's an article up on the website as well. So I actually don't want to go there.
Joe Marmerstein, clearly Tanner is a bad defender, is what I'm hearing. So. It's funny.
All right, let's move on here. Let's talk about the calendar. So here's what we know: College Nationals canceled, or postponed indefinitely. World Championships postponed indefinitely. All of the international events, including U20 Worlds and Masters Worlds, are postponed or canceled. Just today, USA Ultimate announced that the international component of the US Open was being canceled, I guess, for lack of a better word. So they may replace so that's been a 12-team tournament per division in the adult club divisions the last few years. 4 of the 12 in each division have been international teams, lots from Japan and Colombia, but other places as well. They're not going to have those teams this year, so they're deciding whether they're going to keep it as a 12-team tournament and add more domestic teams, or keep it as an 8-team tournament. Now, this, of course, assumes that the tournament is going to happen. It's at the beginning of August. So right now, we basically can say with a fair degree of certainty that we aren't going to have any like important Ultimate events until July, because that's when you've got Triple Crown Tour events that could get started. Now, I think those July tournaments are probably not going to happen. So for me, the first date that you really look at and say, okay, this is when we could really get things started again, is US Open. YCC, top adult club teams at the mega Minneapolis event. It feels hard to sort of prognosticate now whether that's going to happen, but for me, that feels like the most likely restart date for really meaningful Ultimate. Maybe there'll be some, local tournaments that happen before then, but when you're talking about like a big important tournament, I think U.S. Open's the first one that we can really expect to have a chance.
We posited this crazy idea where you push the U.S. Open back and make it like a mega Ultimate tournament. We're like, oh yeah, you have College Nationals, and we'll have the Team USA versus the not Team USA. We'll just do it all there. I mean, we'll just make Blaine our playground.
Mega celebration.
We need to come up with a name for that.
Put in the chat what you think the name should be. The World Games, which of course is the highest level of competition for Ultimate. It happens every 4 years. Mixed division play, 14 players per team, super elite. Great stuff. Remember back to the 2017 edition, Colombia comes out and beats USA early, maybe the first day of the tournament, and rocks the Ultimate world. USA did come back and eventually beat Colombia in the final to win the tournament. But I can't wait for the World Games. But it has been moved from 2021 to 2022 because the Olympics have been postponed by a year. So basically, the Olympics moved into the World Games time slot, and the World Games said, okay, we will move now to July 2022. What does that mean for Ultimate besides World Games happening later? Well, it means that I think we could actually see the World Championships get rescheduled. It was looking pretty suspect because if World Games had happened in July 2021, when are you realistically going to be able to reschedule a tournament of that magnitude? Basically impossible. And as we heard from Brian Gaskell when he was on with us last week. So now that World Games has moved, I think there's a pretty good chance we could see close to, if not the entire full tournament, rescheduled, Keith.
I think that is good news. You're right that it was kind of like there just wasn't enough space, and we've relieved that compression by this whole calendar shift by pushing things backwards. I don't know how long we can buy time with that, how far back that cascades. But for now, in the short term, it does feel like it opens up a lot more possibility, especially because this really is in setting up the WGC. Getting to play these qualifying events is going to make it a lot easier to feel like we have a serious competitive WGC without upsetting people. Now, there's a ton of logistical barriers here, as I'm sure teams have been, all these national teams have been trying to figure out, what are we doing now? People are trying to figure out how to recover their costs. How are they training? Do we keep the team together? And I'm sure getting yo-yoed about is tricky for them. And you could see some fallout from that. Maybe teams that decide we can't put it back together enough to go. But I think that given that so much stuff is kind of in stasis right now, that maybe people have not made enough action that they can't get back to where we need to be by what was that, like 8 months from now? To look further. So,
yeah, it feels so hard to assess. I was just looking at the latest out of China, because China has started to go back to work and at least relax some of the social distancing guidelines and lockdowns that they went through, of course, very heavily a month to 6 weeks ago. And I looked up what's going on with their sports. And basically, some of their professional leagues, like their basketball league, which actually a lot of American players that aren't quite good enough to be in the NBA anymore go to China and play in China. So it's a pretty competitive basketball league. And then they have a soccer league as well. They were looking like they were going to get started maybe April, June, and now there's delays. The government is asking them to wait. Now, it's worth noting that these leagues are, filled with foreign players who are going to be flying in from around the world, which, makes that more challenging because China is trying to prevent the spread of new coronavirus that's being imported from outside of the country. So maybe not quite as applicable to domestic leagues, but I think it is worth noting that, at least for now, sports are not getting back to normal yet in China. So I think we have to be prepared for this to last longer, especially since I can just tell you right now, like in the United States, we're never going to have the same kind of authoritarian lockdown that they had in China, which is probably going to mean this is going to linger longer here. And so it's really, I think, difficult to project right now when things are going to get back to normal. But to me, things like the PUL and AUDL season feel extremely tenuous. I think PUL season will not happen. I think the AUDL season could happen if they're willing to play through the fall and have their championship in September, October, November. And I just don't know if they're going to be willing to do that.
Do you think that the issues with or perhaps no from the reporting with the Chinese leagues is potentially the international players, or is it that, gathering of sports fans is essentially the antithesis of like preventing a viral spread, right? Like this is the worst case environment for safe activity during a viral infection, like an outbreak. So is it the fan issue, or were they going to play without fans and like they don't want to deal with the international travel? I don't know.
I think it's more the international travel side. I don't even know about fans. I wouldn't be surprised if there were fanless games for a while. Right. There is somebody in the chat who says that he's in China right now. Ryan Liu says, I'm currently in China and it's still pretty bad here. I have someone knocking on my door and checking my temperature every day. But Monday Night Pickup is starting. So domestic ultimate happening, if we are to believe this commenter on our YouTube chat. And, that's the thing. Like, having somebody knock on the door and take the temperature every day, are those things ever going to happen in the United States? It doesn't seem like it. And that means that it will be more difficult for us to track cases and, isolate people who are sick. And what does that mean for things like sports? My guess is as good as yours. I don't know. But it's not particularly promising when you think about how long this is going to last.
I feel like I can't talk about this without getting too negative, so I'm trying to hold back. But I will say that I think that there's a not unlikely scenario in the United States where we're looking at, even once we tamp things down, like isolated pockets just coming back, and it becomes less like a pandemic and more like a rash, basically, that just like we can't get rid of, but it doesn't shut the whole country down anymore. I will say, Pavlianis just asked if we can do a deep look on the status of the NBA, and Charlie, I'm going to say that gives us official license to have an NBA podcast because the Ultiworld staff has a lot of NBA geeks in it.
Oh my God, I'm dying I am dying not having sports to watch. Like, it's like, okay, I'm stuck in my apartment. What can I do? I can read a book. I mean, I want to watch NBA games so bad. I've been watching some of the classic games. I watched the Ray Allen Heat game against the Spurs the other night, and that's kind of fun. But it doesn't really scratch the itch the same way. It's like having live sport. It's like the baseball season is supposed to be happening right now. I already paid for the MLB at bat. I'm going to watch the Giants play. I mean, they're not going to be good, but it's just brutal. It's absolutely brutal right now.
I keep seeing these sports social media accounts, and they're tweeting stuff like last night. Bleacher Report was like, the Rockets and the Warriors were supposed to play tonight. What's your favorite memory for Rockets versus Warriors? It's like, this is rough. Like, this is where we're at. They're like doing NBA 2K tournaments right now. My NBA 2K franchise good, like that's what else do we? What not? It's rough. How much would everybody just be ecstatic to have Ultimate 2K right now? God, would that be great? Just to like do something Ultimate related.
All right. So I see a great question here from Lucas. Should they retry out the USA team if they move Worlds to next year, or should they keep the same team?
Smart of Lucas to say should, because there's just zero chance this would ever happen.
I agree. I think it would be truly cruel to the players who made the team to make them try out again and have some of them inevitably get cut because they get hurt or whatever. I think, if you were thinking about how to optimize your chances of winning, you probably would do a new tryout. But it's, how much is it really going to change in terms of the quality of the players from today, the set that we were expecting to play in July to then be a year later? I mean, if you wanted to, if you weren't the United States, you might do a retryout. But you're the United States. You don't need to have tryouts again in order to win the tournament. So you're not going to take that away from people who've already made the team.
Agreed. It would lead to more bad feelings than good ones. Now, I could maybe see them redoing tryouts and just not inviting Sadie Jezierski, but otherwise, I just think it's impossible. I don't think it's going to happen.
Pavel Giannis says, no, they should just cut Kurt and put Abe on. Abe Coffin.
Well, they do need central representation, apparently. Balance out the age distribution.
Here's an interesting question. This has been sitting in the inbox for a little bit, and I want to get to it here. Now that the college season is over, let's assume it's over, but we'll talk about college nationals in a second. What is the legacy of Carlton Cots senior class? After they won a title in their freshman year, we thought they had the talent to win 4 straight. I wonder how history will look back on this group of players. What do you think, Keith?
I think that their legacy is probably going to be more about what they do in club than college. I think that last year in particular really takes a big dip into what we thought this group was going to be able to accomplish, and it's really unfortunate that they don't get their chance. Really gotten off to the greatest start in the world, right? I think we had mostly found their results underwhelming and a little bewildering. So, I think that However, we have seen these players be really successful at the club level. Obviously, Joe White, a leading example, but Dylan Lanier has been awesome at the club level. I think has a ton of potential to be a great club level player as well. Stan Birdsong was having a breakout season really for Carlton this year. So, I think that these players will go on to do great things, and then they'll be mostly considered part of the age, the same way so many previous players have been, than a part of this class, so much to speak. And I feel like this class, maybe they could have redeemed themselves this year, but I don't think they will be reflected on quite with the same luster as like the famous Pitt class. I think that's not there for them anymore.
It's funny you mentioned the famous Pitt class, because that team, those guys never won a title of their own either.
They didn't, and that's unfortunately maybe what they're known for. But they went on to so much success that's what really people think about.
That's fair. I mean, it's hard for me to say. I think it feels like more of an incomplete because they didn't get to play nationals. And I know that they've had some bumps this regular season, but name a Carlton team that dominated outright the whole year and then won nationals. Not in my memory. The year they won, whatever it was, 2013. When did they win? I don't remember. 2015. This senior class's freshman year, they were not like
2017.
They were not incredible during the regular season. They were good, but I think we saw good from them this regular season. Now, the big question has just been like, why is it that this team cannot win without Joe White on the field? It defies logic when you think about the quality of the players on the team. Dylan Lanier was one of the best recruits in his class. He was one of the, he was Liam Searles-Bose's teammate, right? And everybody was talking about LSB and John Randolph that year, but Dylan Lanier was in that class, and I'm getting the timelines messed up here. Is that right? Randolph, maybe Lanier's a year older.
Yeah, Lanier's a year older, but LSB was on that team. Right.
LSB was like the focal. It was like the big star on the team, and Lanier graduated a year before LSB, and it was like, Lanier is an incredible player, and he is an incredible player. But how is it that offense doesn't work without Joe White? I don't understand. Like Dylan Lanier and Stan Birdsong, these are top tier starting club level players. So I don't know. I just don't know. How will history look on them? I think people will talk about it being a massive disappointment. I mean, I don't know what else to say. Like, they didn't go to nationals last year. How did that happen? They were straight up bad when Joe wasn't playing this year. Basically, for 2 years in a row, if Joe White has not been on the field, they have been an average college team. Like, 15 to 25 in the power rankings. I mean, it's not, maybe average is unfair, but
like average nationals team, average elite team or whatever.
Yes. A team that is like battling in the game to go, but is in no way a lock, and you're like, I'm not sure if they're going to make it or not. UCLA. But then Joe's on the field, and boom, they're incredible. Now, I understand that Joe White's a really good player, but I really feel like they should have been better given the rest of the talent on the team. And who knows what they're going to look like next year. I am not optimistic about them being a great team from here for at least the next couple of years. They just don't have that much talent in the pipeline. Some, but not like they had this year.
UNC started keeping all the kids home. UNC and Washington, all the Seattle kids are at UW, and all those UNC kids, all the North Carolina kids are at UNC and NC State. It's a tough break. Appreciate Emery Ultimate in the chat giving a plug to our film room on Joe White's offensive gravity and how effective Joe White is on offense for them. And maybe that's it. I mean, maybe Joe White has so much gravity when he's on the field that they just have never been able to adapt to playing at a different level without him. But you would think,
why don't
given
they
the
take
amount
him
of
off the
key
O-line
reps,
of practice? Like, why don't you just be
know.
like, hey, Joe's going to play defense today, and you're going to let the rest of the offense play? Like, hello? Did you not learn from last year?
You would think that an offense with Stan Birdsong, Dylan Lanier, and Harry Wolf-Landau and Andrew Roy is like enough to beat UT Dallas.
You would
it's
think.
Not.
You would think. You would think. You would think. Shout out to UT Dallas. Pavel Yana says in the chat, Alex Nord cut team in 2001 completely dominant. That is well before my time, but I believe it. Alex Nord, absolute monster, one of the legends.
I mean, he's an all-time great college player and probably player, period. But I also think that now it's pretty hard to dominate. It's hard to win multiple championships class. I mean, we've seen UNC be at that level, but I think it's getting harder and harder. Like the field is getting better, and the elite programs, there are more of them. And these recruits are coming in that keep teams really good for long periods of time, but they're spread out. I think that it's getting harder to, be a dynasty in that way. And to see a team like Carlton lose at regionals, I think says something, because they're not the only ones. I mean, we give them a hard time, but we already talked about UMass.
Also, it is worth pointing out, North Central Regionals is an absolute slugfest. And Iowa State last year, that team was better than people thought. So you got to give your tip of the cap to North Central Regionals. It's always crazy. It's always a battle. Nobody is ever a lock. Ever. We've seen number one teams go into that tournament and lose. Minnesota did it a few years ago. It's tough conditions. Teams are gritty. And there's a lot of good teams. So you got to give the tip of the cap there, but still. Carlton should have been better.
A lot of blame for Sol right now in the chat.
Better club player for the next 5 years? Question from Andrew. Joe White or Tanner Johnson?
I'll take Joe on that. It's pretty close though. I mean, they're super comparable.
I think Joe White. Just haven't seen. I feel like this past year with Machine, we saw that Joe White was not just like an up-and-coming talent, but that he could be the best player on the field for points at a time. And Tanner has done that in the mixed division at times, but I don't feel like we've seen the level of production necessary at the very highest level to feel like he has a higher ceiling than Joe White.
I would love to see. I mean, we joked about Tanner's defense and his offensive proclivities earlier in the pod or the video, whatever you want to call this, our radio show. But I would love to see him become a really dynamic defender. I feel like his physical tools are certainly there for him to be an awesome D-line player, and that could really separate him from a player like Joe White, who is known also for his offensive explosiveness. But I think what we saw from Joe this year was just more advanced than what we've seen from Tanner and more versatile. I mean, it was just hard to take Joe White out of the game. He's honestly a far more advanced player than I would have expected at the beginning of his career. I thought he might have been a little overhyped from that rookie class, but man, has he developed in a really rapid way.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like he could be the next big thing. I mean, just got gifts at the sport, and if he can clean up the decision making and get that like killer instinct that the greats all have, that you see from Kurt and Bo and Jimmy when he's in shape, then I think you can see that. So college nationals in the fall. Somebody sent in a mailbag question to me about this, and I thought it was kind of interesting. Like, could they make it happen, Keith? Could you delete most of the fall season that exists today and just be like, all right, we're going to have conferences, regionals, and nationals starting in like early October with rosters from this past year?
So I do think it helps if you can extend eligibility. I think that makes it a little bit easier. I think in the mailbag you raised the point about, maybe USA okay about having non-students competing. I think a lot of club sports and a lot of school administrations are not going to want non-students representing the university under the university's name.
First
I think that could be a real barrier. But I also think the full series is just, that to me seems totally impossible. To do the full series requires involving so many schools, so many administrations. It means getting a lot more volunteer sites. It means a lot more volunteer work, a lot more field sites. All of this happening potentially while you're trying to have concurrently a compressed club season. You may have the various leagues trying to compete at the same time. Everyone can't try and do everything once we get back outside.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We're not going to be the only sport trying to figure out how to do our schedule in a short time. I think field sites tough to come by. The full series to me is just not happening. Finding some way to do some sort of, even a qualifier event, like playing beyond one weekend, feels really, really difficult to me. I have been skeptical. I feel like I've been very much on the conservative side with everything we've talked about regarding our ability to get back to competition. But if USAU thinks that they could do it, I mean, I think the question comes down to what level of national are you, like, what's the lowest thing you would be willing to accept?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. The first thing I thought of when I saw this question, and when I initially saw it, I thought it was nonsense. Because I thought the same thing. I was like, well, there's no way a university is going to approve just like people who graduated to come back and like represent the university. But in fact, many players graduate from college before they go to college nationals. Like, a lot of commencements are in May. People get their diplomas. It's done. It's over. The semester is over. They've graduated, and they go then and play at college nationals. So what you're saying is it's okay for that to happen in May, but not in October? I mean, I think that administrators might decide that, yes, that is in fact different, because now we started a new semester, so then those people are now gone out of our system. But logically, it would be reasonable to just be like, yeah, it's fine. They were enrolled during the season that was relevant.
I wonder. I mean, I've Charlie and I have not qualified for nationals. Charlie has lamented this many times, but the logistics of figuring out how to get your school to take care of the stuff that you need to in order to compete after a lot of schools are done is already challenging. To me, going back to the last year, like, school calendars are not going to be like, hey, we're still finishing up last spring. Like, they're going to be trucking ahead. I think it would be difficult. I mentioned the idea of, like, maybe USAU tries to play up the mixed series, or maybe they host some sort of other alternative celebratory elite event, like trying to get elite teams together that isn't necessarily nationals. But it sounds like, from what you've talked about and from what we've heard, I mean, it sounds like they're trying to figure out how can we get some sort of national championships. And the moving parts there are numerous, but they're going to be, them along with their volunteers and what teams are willing to do is going to be the deciding factor here.
Yeah. I mean, if it's going to be like, oh, we're going to have a mixed national championship, I don't want to have any part of that. I'm not interested. That's like, if you can't make some sort of quasi-nationals thing happen, and I call it quasi, like, you invite the team, some can't come, you can get a couple others, then if it at least feels like it could be a national championship and that we're competing for titles, great. If you can't do it for whatever reason, just don't fight it. It sucks to have to cancel college nationals, but I think you have to make the call.
Agreed. And I that they are trying to investigate alternative options, but you mentioned earlier how they're going to have a lot of their very limited resources. It's not a big organization, USA Ultimate, looking at the club season. And who knows where we're going to be in the international schedule. Like, if they're going to do the club championships or the world championships the following year. How is USAU dealing with that? Are they still, is there going to be stuff with U24s that they have to figure out? What about the other national team? Like, there's just going to be a lot of stuff at once, and this feels like a lot of additional headache on them when they otherwise would not have that. Running the fall season for them, I think, is a lot lower resource intensive than what this sort of operation would be like.
This is amazing. I am getting real-time information about this issue from Tom Manowitz, the college director of competition at USA Ultimate.
Our guy.
He is chatting
and friend
me.
Of Ultimate.
He is chatting me on Gmail, listening to this podcast right now. And he says he's actually spoken to over 15 schools about this so far. And he says that some schools are willing to talk about exceptions, but that club sports guidelines are an issue, that, this would not be the natural thing. By the way, it's 7 o'clock. You probably can't hear it. Maybe you can hear it. People are cheering for the healthcare workers who are changing shifts right now. This is happening all across New York City. Maybe this is happening in your city. You can hear the honking and the cheering, perhaps.
I very faintly hear it. So
yeah, my mic does a pretty good job of blocking out the sound, so not sure how audible it is. But everyone goes to the window and cheers for the healthcare workers who are obviously dealing with a ton across the country, but particularly here in New York City. And it's just really a nice thing every day at 7 p.m. It's like the one time when everybody feels like they're together. And I've seen videos of this happening around the world. But that's very cool. Anyway, Tom Manowitz says that schools would have to lobby for waivers from their risk management departments, which makes sense. It's the lawyers have to get involved, basically.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we were getting at earlier, is that the schools are probably pretty reticent to take on any additional risk in that sort of thing. But USAU is doing their due diligence, and that's a positive sign if you're hopeful to get a chance to play college nationals in the fall. Like, just because I'm saying that I feel like it's unlikely to happen does not mean I don't want it to happen. I mean, I love college nationals. Don't get me wrong.
I would love it if they could figure out a way. It would be awesome. Connor Russell asks, at what point would Ultiworld try to host college nationals as an unsanctioned event? Never. There's just no way that it sounds good in theory, but think about it. Like, if teams were to go without approval from their universities to some event where it was like a quasi college nationals, that would be a huge problem. Like, if the programs got caught doing that, they might be disbanded forever. We would never allow something like that to happen, or try to go behind USAU's back on something like that. I know it would be great. Everybody wants to see college nationals happen. Hopefully USAU can figure it out. All right, we're getting some really good questions from Khalif El Salam, changing gears here a little bit, about the women's club division.
Yeah.
And here's one I'm going to throw right to you, Keith. We've talked about this many times. I want to know your thoughts on what Molly Brown needs to do to make it to a finals game. What matchup do they need in semis to have the highest chance to win? And same for finals. Remember,
clearly not Brute Squad.
Or Schwa.
It would be great to avoid Brute Squad.
Schwa, it's the giant killer.
I think that it's difficult, and this is something we with at Ultiworld is trying to make judgments on programs over the years, because we talked about this with Riot and them being unable to get over the hump to win the title, and it's like it's kind of a small sample size. I mean, you're talking about 4 games over 4 years, right? And judging a team based on that, and that's hard. So, at what point do you say that this trend is meaningful? And the thing that I've gotten from my time around Molly Brown and talking to them and getting to watch them is that it feels like they have struggled. They have struggled with this, and that it's caused them to have some questions about their identity as a team and their culture, and that means that they haven't really landed on something that they feel like works for them. I don't know what that actually manifests as Molly Weird or whether it's the Zop or whatever cultural pieces
The Zop.
we can see from the outside. But it's a tough. They're going up against teams that have really well established identities. Like what you're getting with Fury, what you're getting with Brute Squad. You, for the most part, know what you're getting with Riot, and breaking through that is really hard. I mean, basically nobody's been able to break through Brute Squad and Fury, right? Even last year, when you get in the finals, Brute Squad and Fury played in the semifinals on the other side of the bracket, and they played a tremendous game that certainly made you feel like that was really the final. So, they've gotten closer each year. They've recruited a lot of great talent, and for me, it feels like they just need to figure out who they want to be and find what works for them, and then be able to adapt that year after year, because they are behind where teams like Brute Squad and Fury were, who established that a little bit earlier.
And the thing is,
in Fury's case, a long time earlier.
It's not just about like who they want to be. It's also about being able to have the confidence to play at your best level in the crunch time. Because this is when that goes wrong for them. They play great during the regular season, and things keep going wrong for them in semis, in quarters. And they play well during pool play. Let me set. I want to say this because I think it's important. What is it? Has it been they lost 4 years in a row to Brute Squad? Is that what it was? In semis?
I believe so, yeah.
4 years in a row. Brutal. But at the end of the day, Brute Squad was just a better team. Brute Squad was just a better team.
Yeah, multiple of those were championships for Brute Squads. So.
I'm sorry. Like Molly Brown kept drawing the best team and then losing to them. And there's not really a shame in that. I think it sucks. I think the thing that was disappointing is that Molly would like come out to a good start and then just implode. And it seemed like they couldn't get their footing back and like maintain that confidence. And that's all up here. That's all mental. That's all mental. The mentality is the problem, not the skill. But I will say this year, I don't think the team was quite as good as they've been in years past. And I don't think that it should come as an entire shock that Schwa beat them. Schwa was good this year. Schwa beat Molly Brown during the regular season. And then they beat them again in Nationals. It may have just been a good matchup for Schwa. Now, I know Schwa didn't go on and win the championship or anything, but they were a good team. So, but I think, again, I do think there's a mentality thing there. I think it's very possible that Molly Brown went into that game against Schwa, and they're like, oh, we're playing Schwa. This will be an easy win. And then
who do we get in semis?
You can't do that, right? That's more mentality problems. Worrying that you're going to lose can be just as bad as thinking that you're going to win. And how many times have we seen a team with a big matchup looming in the next round lose to an inferior opponent? I mean, it happens every year at every Nationals, college, club, youth. It doesn't matter. Now, the thing is, some teams don't have this problem because they've got the mentality side locked down. But a lot of times it just comes down to straight-up talent, and I think the problem for Molly is that they just haven't had quite enough of it to beat one of the best teams of a generation in Brute Squad. That's just tough luck.
Absolutely, that Brute Squad team would beat, not only would, but did beat pretty much everybody. So, like, it's tough. Do I think that they can accomplish it? I mean, they've had one of the best players in the division for years. They've built talent around that. They have other young and up-and-coming players. Maybe this Colorado's continued success will continue to bleed into them too. So, as they keep developing those players, maybe things will turn around for them. But
people are talking about this in the chat. Like Ironside couldn't win a championship, so they got Kurt, and then they did. Well, I mean, it is true that Molly could probably really benefit from picking up you name the player, a Cammie Groom, a Claire Desmond, an elite tier player that you could put onto either your O or your D and take the leap. And honestly, it might even be more helpful to have somebody with the mentality of knowing how to win and like having that leadership. Even the pony team from last year that, ended up beating Revolver, or 2 years ago, sorry. Bo Kittredge joined that team. Bo Kittredge didn't do that much for them. He was a fine role player, tail end of his career, but what he did bring was that he knew how to win and that he could go into the huddle and have credibility saying, I know how to win. Here is what we need to do. And what players on Molly have that experience? There probably are one or two, but I'm not even sure about that.
I do think that there is kind of an X factor of, I expect them to keep getting potential talent. Denver is a place people want to be, and we've seen these kind of ultimate hubs just as magnets. The more people move there, the more other good players want to move there, and you get these world tryouts, and people all become friends, and they're like, hey, let's all play together and stuff. We could see more of that. You could see more players appearing on Molly Brown. Maybe Manu helps them bring in, suddenly Elizabeth Mosqueda's on Molly Brown. Like, these things could happen, right?
Yeah. Khalif also asks, Toronto Sixers came out of nowhere this postseason, but they have been on the brink of greatness for a while. What pushed them over the edge? Did they just have one good tournament, or was it inevitable?
Inevitable feels strong. I think that they are on their way to basically the position that Molly Brown's been in. They were a young team that was getting experience playing in big games. They had started to build that confidence. Hey, we can beat these other elite teams. We can go toe-to-toe with them. And, I mean, they're so talented and young. And they've kind of got this bubble ecosystem where a bunch of players get to play with each other really frequently, and that just makes them better and better over time. And you see a team whose best players are about to start their prime, or maybe haven't even gotten there in some cases. So I think that the upward trajectory was clear for Sixers, and we were all expecting it. It was kind of just a question of like, when would they start to be semifinals team, and would they need another team to kind of move out of the way to open up that spot? And this year's Nationals, they beat Riot. I don't know how anybody could have predicted that. It would have been insane if someone would have predicted that exact result. It was just like totally off the map. That person would be like Nostradamus. But it happened, and they played really well. You're going to work
that for all it's worth, aren't you? No matter how many terrible predictions you make, we're always going to hear about this one.
Look, if we're gonna bash these teams for not winning the big one, if they won the big one, they would let you know about it, right? So let me take my lap, even in perpetuity. I'll just lap real slow. As it is though, Sixers, I think you're going to continue to see them be really good. And will they make it to the finals again? I don't know. I feel like they won their big quarters game, and then they got in a situation where they had a favorable matchup in semifinals. And if they had Lauren Kimura, like I don't know if they would have been able to make that game. Obviously, the score would have been better, but I don't know if they would have been like,
they don't win,
stepping on Brute Squad's toes. Brute Squad wasn't exceptional. So, however, it's a great opportunity for them to get a lot of learning in for the other players in the team, and I think it's going to benefit them in the long run that they got to the final. They got to say we were in the national championship game, and these young players are just going to keep getting better.
Yeah, and to specifically answer Khalif's question, did they just have one good tournament? No. Remember, they won the Northeast. No. They beat Brute Squad at regionals, and they had been getting better and better. The thing is, what it comes down to in Club Ultimate is no matter how good a team you are, if you get to pre-quarters or quarters and you lose, no one's going to remember. No one's going to remember you, unless you were supposed to win. But you have to get to semis, and like Sixers has been in the zone. They've been in that quarters zone. It's just that every time they get to quarters, they lose 15-9. So, even if you lose 15-14, it doesn't matter. If you don't make semis, no one's going to remember. So finally they break through and they get to that, semis level. And then they played Schwa in semis and won and went to and lost to the Brute in the final. Is that right?
That is right.
So I think Sixers could win a championship in the next 5 years. I really do.
I think you'd be crazy to say they couldn't.
They have,
especially on a 5-year time.
Right.
I mean, is there any team with as much young talent as they have?
Exactly. And they're coalescing all of the talent in Eastern Canada. And maybe they peel off 1 or 2 players from Vancouver. We've seen it happen before. And if they get, if Chewy decides I'm going to take a year and go play with Sixers and try to get a dub in USAU Club Series, that could be enough. They only need 1 or 2 more players to make you really think like, hey, this team could do it. And how many years does this Brute team have left? They clearly are still going to be one of the best teams. They're going to continue to compete for championships, but their best players are in their late prime, soon to be heading out of the prime, right?
I don't know. Angel Zoo and Juliana really took a lot of steps forward.
That is true, but I still think like when you think about this team, you're thinking about Cami Groom, you're thinking about Leon Hoffman, you're thinking about
Amber Sinacrope,
Becky Malinowski. Sure, I'm not saying that Boston's going to disappear. I'm just saying that
but you need every weapon at your disposal to be at the top,
especially when you have like Team Canada in your backyard, getting ready to come and face you at nationals.
I totally agree. Totally agree. I know. So this question hasn't been in the chat, but it's something I was thinking about, and we touched on it earlier, but we didn't really go in on this. So I want to ask Charlie, what the heck happened to the AC men? We're talking about AC men's as maybe the best region in the country. Now it's like they have one bid. Even if things have gone well at Eastern's, like what do they get to 2? Like, do we miss completely on this region or what? Like,
all right. Hang on. I'm going to frisbee-rankings.com. 2020 Coach of the Year Cody Mills website that tracks the rankings. And let me talk to you about AC. So UNC number 1. Okay. And then we got to go down here and we've got UNC Wilmington number 20, NC State number 21, William and Mary number 23, South Carolina number 26, and if you want to go down a little further, you can even drop all the way down and say number 34, James Madison. Did we miss? I don't think so. I'm going to look at the let's look at this and the UNC Wilmington team. Okay. They lost to NC State. The one thing that really kills them is they lost to Notre Dame. You remember that game? That was at Queen City. They won their pool, went undefeated, but then didn't get to play in the finals because of the wacky Queen City stuff, and they came out and laid an egg in the next day because how can you blame them? So they lose that game.
Yes.
Not a good loss. They lose to Minnesota. Okay, so maybe that tells you a little bit about where they are. They lose again. They lose to UNC. They lose very close games to Massachusetts and Ohio State. And so like look at the resume, right? From that perspective, not from the the algorithm points perspective. They got rocked by that Notre Dame loss, took 23 points off their ranking. To me, this is like a very solid team. To me, they're easily inside the top 20 if I'm doing my power rankings and not the algorithm rankings. And I think you can do similar things for the other teams. NC State hurt by injuries. William and Mary maybe never was quite there. South Carolina, good team, not great. And I think you're still seeing all of the depth, right? When you have 5 teams in the top 30, maybe even top 25, that is the depth. It's just a question of like, do those other bids, do those rankings points break your way for the 2 or 3 teams? You know, this easily could have been a 3 or 4 bid region if a couple things go differently.
I don't disagree with that, but I mean, if you look at like the probabilistic rankings, which are supposed to measure more of your overall regional strength rather than just how good is your best 2 teams or whatnot, they still only get 2 bids. You know, we're looking at the Northwest,
but they barely miss on a third with NC State. Barely miss.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But, I mean, I think, can we agree, full strength NC State, top 10 team?
Oh, I'm big on NC State. I'm definitely there for NC State. Their ranking really got tanked by their performance at Smoky Mountain Invite when they were not at full strength.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and maybe it's not fair. Like NC State and being injured, name a better duo. I mean, I think this team has been hampered by this, and at some point you have to just call a spade and understand that like this is like part of they have a problem. Like there's an issue with their team and dealing with a lot of injuries.
Got to fix the training staff.
Something like that. So I fire the strength and conditioning coach. This is a great comment. Kyle Halstatter says, Ethan Bloodworth made his own rankings, which I trust much more than Ultiworld or USA Ultimate. Very fair. Very fair. We should let Ethan Bloodworth, you know, determine how things play out here for the rest of the year. You know, like what tournaments should happen, how should college nationals happen in the fall? Put him on
we
USAU
can get
staff.
E-Blood on the show. Yes, E-Blood for USAU staff. We just need to get an election going.
Here's a good question. Before the stoppage, this is from Owen, what odds would you have given for Carlton Syzygy going undefeated? And winning a championship, presumably.
Do we know, were they going to Northwest Challenge?
I think so.
I don't expect them to go undefeated, I don't think. I don't know, though. I guess they're not going to see... There's no Ann Worth to deal with. I mean, but they were getting pushed by that Tufts team. Undefeated's tough, but definitely doable. Maybe I'm selling them short.
I mean, they played a bad game against Tufts in the Stanford Invite Final and still won. I mean, I think they win nationals, and so I'm going to say yes, they go undefeated because they're not going to lose to some scrub team in pool play when they get the 1 seed.
That's true.
And so, like, basically, it's like, do you think they're going to lose in semis or finals? I don't know what we would have seen from UNC at full strength. You know, how does that team gel?
Yeah,
do
we'll
they
never
look
know.
good? Like, how much playing time would Ann Worth have ended up getting during the year at practice and such? I think I wrote about this at some point. I think, you know, dealing with an individually amazing player can be really difficult for some teams, and we've seen that happen. So, like, would Carlton have struggled to deal with the skill of Ann Worth? I don't know. Mariah Sims, kind of a beast downfield.
Oh, man, give me that matchup. That's rip the season because you miss out on that stuff.
Follow up on this one. Who was more likely to stay undefeated, Syzygy or Darkside?
Easy Carlton. And I've been on North Carolina all year on the men's side, but a lot more tenuous, and we know their history at Easterns, and they might not be as incentivized really to even keep their foot on the gas.
UNC loves to lose at Easterns. I mean, they can't.
The coaching staff likes it. The coaching staff wants them to get punched in the face before semis and nationals or whatever. You just don't want that to be your first, like, holy crap moment. You love to get that in before you get to the big show.
Yep. Keith, I think we have to decide live on the air what our subscriber bonus segment is going to be, and then we're going to have to do it off the air. But
any what do you want in the chat? What do you guys want us to do for the subscriber bonus?
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to tap that like button over there, the thumbs up. Don't be afraid.
Yeah.
Don't be shy.
Subscribe bell. I think I just want to note I sent out the subscriber-only newsletter that I write about business topics in Ultimate and people and personalities and other things. And I've spent a lot of time the last couple of weeks talking to business owners in Ultimate, and it's really bad right now. Companies are really hurting. I knew there would be challenges, but I don't think I fully realized even like 2 weeks ago that, we were going to see demand for all things related to Ultimate just like completely plummet. So if you're a subscriber, make sure to check that out. And if you're like a new subscriber, we have a landing page with all of these newsletters that have gone out over the last year or so. And I think I just reiterate again, if you can afford to buy a gift card or something for a future purchase for your team's jerseys or whatnot, now is a great time to do it, because people are looking at, we're seeing at a lot of apparel companies like 50% staff cuts, layoffs, because it's just no one's carrying enough money in the bank to be able to meet payroll for 3 months with no revenue, because no one's buying jerseys right now. So pretty scary. I'm worried about the industry, basically. So it's really, it's a time where if you're going to play your club season or your college season and you're able to do it, to put $1,000 on a gift card and be like, hey, we're going to work with you next year. We'll pay now, and basically give them a free loan, as Keith and I talked about last time. It's really a good time to do it. I'm not going to keep beating this horse, but if you need a new jersey or something, go buy it from an Ultimate company. Buy a pair of Ultimate cleats. It's a great time to support a company, even if you haven't worked with them in the past.
And a lot of the companies are throwing out. There's some there right now, so not a bad time to shop if you can't afford it. And I think you can feel pretty confident if you get new cleats, you're going to get to use them in the future. Appreciate everybody who's hitting the like button, just seeing the likes shoot up. So that's much appreciated. Again, when I asked about what we're going to do in the subscriber segment, I think the most commented reply has been 2 Pavlianis comments of NBA. So it's getting dicey over here. Good NBA pod.
Okay, so Keith, we gotta decide what we're gonna do for subscriber bonus. I'm looking in the chat if there's anything good.
Jack says cinnamon challenge.
Oh God.
I have cinnamon. I'm pretty sure there's some here.
Oh my God. We could do it. I don't know how well it would respond in the audio department, but we could do it on video.
Why? Why are we doing it? Why is this?
I don't know. We shouldn't do that.
This isn't in the fields.
We should make that our, if College Nationals happens in the fall, that will be the punishment for Sin the Fields if they lose the picks competition.
It's not the most creative thing, but
let's see.
We could just take more questions. There are some questions we can get to. We could do that in the subscriber section.
Might just do that. Might scroll through this chat and pull out some of the questions that we didn't answer. And
I think Khalif had another one. Yeah, there's some good ones in here.
Great. All right. We'll do that. So thanks so much for tuning in. For those of you, this is our first time doing this live. Let us know what you think in the live chat before you sign off. Should we do this again? Should we do this more often? We're going to make, if we continue to do this, we'll make some tweaks, like figuring out Keith's internet situation so that the audio doesn't sound so scrambled next time. But we'd love to hear from you if you think this is like a cool format for the show. I think it's kind of fun to have the interactivity. That's not something we normally get from Deep Look. We could even have some guests on in the future live. Like I can have people call in basically, and we can do video chats with folks. So get your questions in for our subscriber bonus segment. Let us know what you thought of this segment and this format. And for Keith Raynor, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long, and we'll talk to you next week right here on Deep Look.